Good afternoon. I'm Robert Perez, Perez. I'm the coordinator for the Oaks and Prairies joint venture housed within the American Bird Conservancy. Next. So, part of our group of conservationists that are really interested in this topic of the central grasslands, one of these individuals, Jeff Ross, said this at one of our meetings. Conserving the central grasslands of North America is the conservation challenge of our time and cannot be tackled by individual organizations. And truer words haven't been spoken. Next. So first up is there is a crisis. There's been tremendous loss of the North American grasslands biome. And it doesn't take a scientist to figure out that when the grasslands disappear, the grassland birds that rely on them and other wildlife also decline. And there's a whole bunch of information out there that points to these significant and large declines in grassland birds, that suite of birds. Next. So there's a few groups really focused on this, and there's a lot of energy and momentum behind addressing these declines in the species that are impacted. One of the largest groups is the Central Grasslands Roadmap, which is a collective of stakeholders across the Central Grasslands with different sectors and nations, tri-national and including First Nations and tribes in this effort to focus on collaboration and common priorities across this whole geography because the birds don't know state boundaries or country boundaries. They migrate north and south, and we are all touched by them. And there's a website there at the bottom that you can learn more about the Central Grasslands Roadmap, which is big picture, a long, long list of partners really focused on this crisis of loss of the grasslands, and has reached out to whole different user groups and new partners, and trying to do the best to get the word out. And bring attention and funding and interest, more interest in supporting that core grassland. On the right hand of the screen is JV8, which I'm a part of, one of 8 joint ventures. And those partners that work for those joint ventures focus on habitat conservation and implementation. And I understand that when I say joint ventures, many folks may not understand or have a history or what exactly joint ventures do, but they're the organizations, all bird, that were very instrumental in bringing back in solving other crises in the past, like the decline of waterfowl and wetland habitats, really focused on bird conservation. Next. So none of this work can happen without working lands. And it's no accident that the remaining populations, the stable populations of these declining grassland birds occur across the grasslands biome on working lands. Other activities over a long period of time, like what were the losses? What were the threats to these grasslands? Well, conversion to cropland in some of the really better soils, of course, that's really an impact because it completely removes the habitat that those birds can use. In the South, often it's encroachment of woodies that take over those landscapes, and they no longer are grasslands, but they become savannas, and then they become shrublands, or they become forest. And so that natural those processes that kept those places open are kind of removed, like fire, natural processes that happen over time. So it's no accident that these working lands, folks that are out there, these economies that are keeping this land and keeping this land working open, that benefits those birds. And so we're really focused on working with partners and finding ways that we can ensure that these spaces continue to provide that habitat. And it's because of folks that are on the landscape now. Next. So JV8, the vision for that group is that these grasslands are going to continue to support in some cases, and in other places grow to support stable, thriving, and diverse communities of birds, other wildlife, and people well into the future. And so our mission is to do that work that we have been doing in the migratory joint ventures, but really expand that across North America for the stewardship of these ecosystems. Um, Next. And when you say that, what does it take? So it's a huge area. It's not at all like the challenge that with wetlands and waterfowl that were declining. Those wetland acres across our country are very a small footprint, but the biome for grasslands is really large. And so it shouldn't be a surprise that when you put a pencil to it, to bring to maintain, to restore, to enhance habitat, to do the work on the ground, to make sure that these spaces are there for these birds, it would take billions of funding and really to address millions of acres. Next. So why does this approach of collaborative conservation matter? like Jeff said, because we can't do it alone, and we need to expand our partnership. There's no doubt that there's a crisis. We all can agree on that. And there's an impact that impacts more than just grassland birds. It impacts people, it impacts soil, air, water, and so we know that there are big impacts across that landscape. And so we've got lofty goals of conserving, 12 million acres in the first 5 years, just to kind of stabilize these declines. It's important that we work collaboratively because organizations like JV8, they really have the partnership know-how. So there's a history, and when you take all eight and all the management boards and support of these organizations that have been in play for decades, it represents just hundreds of partners that have been doing conservation. It's really a matter of, what will it take to scale up and address this problem, and having those partners and the trust that it takes to build those things. And there's that proven business model in the joint venture system, as I mentioned earlier, when they really crack that nut and try to solve the declining wetlands and solve those great recoveries of waterfowl species. Next. What are the actual actions that we're trying to get there on the ground? So across these eight joint ventures, you can see the areas in orange are where we're working now with our current funding levels and staff. This is where we have projects, and we're trying to get to support work that's benefiting these declining birds. And the blue areas are places where we would like to work if we had more resources to expand and address other critical areas for the species. And specifically, like up north, many areas are focused on protection, which are easement type work, trying to keep those things in permanent protection well into the future. In the southern grasslands, restoration, crops, restoring old cropland, that type of work. Habitat enhancement in the south is really working with producers on prescribed grazing, prescribed fire, on removing invasive species like brush and woody encroachment. So those are the actions that really help with those habitats. And all of these areas are looking for habitat persistence. And that's a bit more nebulous, but persistence means that folks that are working and get supports to do this and guidance, and we're all working together, that there's real incentives, that the bottom line on working lands is maintained or improved because of these actions, and that those habitats are going to persist through time. Really important, that last bucket there. And our goal is to really see no net loss of grasslands from 2034 to 2044, so a 10-year trend. And again, it's billions of dollars a year, and it's millions of acres. Next. And when you focus down to a finer level, like pick one joint venture where we're doing some work for Oaks and Prairies joint venture, my joint venture, or the Rio Grande joint venture. There are programs that we've called a grassland restoration incentive programs that they started in Texas, and then they've been reproduced across other parts of the country. But really, these programs are intended to be nimble and to create or maintain native grassland habitat and increasing that bottom land, but really to keep working lands working. So it's a quick and easy way to connect with and work with producers and have a really short turnaround on getting a contract going and providing a reimbursement as an example, to maybe do a small scale prescribed burn, and to get folks almost like training wheels started in these programs, and then giving the assistance and support if they've never worked with, say, NRCS and an EQIP program or RCPP, to have that support and guidance to get them connected to those things. So these are only a few right now, but hopefully growing across the landscape, an example of like where the rubber hits the road, how these organizations can work with producers and with ranchers and landowners to really make a difference for those birds. And at the bottom there, you can see what it says. Don Wilhelm wants, what's good for the bird is good for the herd. So there you go. I appreciate your time, and I think that's my last slide.
So I'm Jennifer Kaplan. I'm the Arizona State Coordinator for the Partners Program. Do I have to say my name? I guess KAPLAN. So thank you, Robert. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about another conservation program for landowners, ranchers, that provides financial and technical assistance for on-the-ground habitat restoration. The Partners for Fish and Wildlife Program is a voluntary partnership program that works with private and tribal lands. We know that private lands comprise approximately 2/3 of the land in the United States. And since a significant portion of grasslands occur on private lands, engaging landowners is essential for conservation. Since 1987, the Partners Program has worked with over 50,000 landowners, and we've collaborated to do over 60,000 habitat restoration projects on over 6 million acres. But the Partners Program is not just about the numbers, it's more about the partnerships that we build. So the heart of the program is working with private landowners to provide tailored technical and financial assistance to landowners who are committed to doing wildlife enhancement habitat work on their lands. So our locally based biologists work with the landowner to implement the projects that meet the landowner's needs. Every project is different. We understand that the lands are different and the conservation challenges are different across the nation. So we help landowners with provide funding. We can pair them up with other partners, and we can help with compliance if needed. So we do focus on grassland habitat improvement in the Southwest. We can do livestock exclusion work. We can provide alternate water supply. We can work on invasive species management, woody encroachment, planting native vegetation, planting native grass and forbs, working on prescribed grazing programs. We can also work on wetland and stream bank habitats. We work closely with NRCS and our state game and fish agencies to deliver their conservation priorities as well. I couldn't talk about conservation funding without mentioning NRCS. We know that the Farm Bill programs are the largest source of grassland conservation funding in the US. We share many of the same common conservation priorities between our agencies and NGOs across the nation. NRCS has many programs for working lands for birds, and there's so much collaboration to occur, especially with RCPP, EQIP. We could go on and on with the acronyms. And now I get to turn it over to Sarah King.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah King, and I'm based out of Arizona and work with Jennifer and her team as well. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So as I was saying, I'm Sarah King, and I'm a rancher on the King's Anvil Ranch, which is located southwest of Tucson. We're a red Angus cow-calf operation that's been in operation since 1895, and our kids are the fifth generation to grow up on the ranch, and we're really excited to have them be part of our operation and be in the business that we're in and working cattle and working with our family as well. I also am the executive director for the Altar Valley Conservation Alliance. Next slide. So for those of you who aren't familiar with our little corner of Arizona, this is the Altar Valley, which is about a 600,000 acre watershed, and it's located southwest of Tucson, Arizona, and it goes down to the US-Mexico border. It is a very interesting area. It's largely undeveloped, and to be so close to a major metropolitan area like Tucson and be such a large undeveloped landscape is really rare these days. And it's comprised of largely private ranches with then the 100,000 acre Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge as part of the valley as well. So there's a lot of collaboration that goes on within the valley and within landowners. Next slide. So the Altar Valley Conservation Alliance, which I've worked for about 15 years now, is a watershed-based collaborative conservation organization that was founded by the Altar Valley ranchers back in 1995, who were kind of looking around at some of the development pressures that were coming in from Tucson, looking at different land ownerships. We have things like Arizona state land, federal land. Pima County also has ranches that they own, private land, and then the refuge itself. So a lot of different landscapes that are coming together as one. And the watershed doesn't realize who owns what pieces. So I'm really thinking about the landscape as a watershed as a whole. The ranchers in the valley kind of got together as neighbors, said, how do we look forward? How do we solve problems that are going on? How do we reach for opportunities? And came up with this concept of this organization, which the Malpai Borderlands group was also getting started right about the same time. So kind of an idea of ways to represent the ranching community and to really drive conservation by the folks who call this landscape home. and are looking at it on a day-to-day basis and want to see this continue to be an open, undeveloped landscape for generations to come. So today we have programs in conservation, science, and community outreach and education. And next slide. We work by building relationships and partnerships. Projects don't just happen. Stuff doesn't just happen. You need to work with people, understand where they're coming from, understanding what their goals are, and have a relationship with those folks in order for people to be looking for opportunities to engage with one another and engage on the landscape. Next slide. And it's really important to get all those people out on the landscape. It's hard to have abstract conversations just in meetings. It takes walking around together, seeing what's going on, if there are issues to solve, if there are things to continue to conserve and hold up those positive examples, have everybody on the same page while they're having those conversations. And then, just the act of being out there on the landscape and seeing what you're doing and why you're doing it, I think has really been positive to be out there as a group, giving people time to get to know each other and build those relationships, but also recognize why all the work, especially the not glamorous computer emails, etc., all the behind the scenes stuff, why everyone is putting in that effort and what the lift is for. Next slide. We also emphasize working on agreed upon goals. There's a lot of things that folks could find to be divided over, but working on agreed upon goals where everyone's on the same page and working towards the same thing. There's plenty of work out there to be done and plenty of ways that people can collaborate together. And so really emphasizing those, finding the common ground, and getting people engaged on those is really important to the Altar Valley Conservation Alliance. Next slide. We've spent a lot of time working on large-scale planning efforts that have culminated recently in the Altar Valley Watershed Plan, which was a collaborative process that was funded by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation with a Water Smart grant. And that's engaged any stakeholder within the valley who was interested in participating. We had many meetings over the years talking about the plan. The most exciting part about the plan is that it includes, not just sort of the usual what and why, future conditions, etc., but also projects that we want to see happen on the ground. And those were brought forward and vetted by the group. And so those, when funding opportunities come along, those are kind of designed to be ready to go and to be proactive rather than reactive to funding opportunities and being in a scramble. So we're really excited about that part. And we know that it is really important to think about the watershed on a watershed scale and engage folks in those conversations and in that planning. But as you'll see on the next slide, we also really recognize that people respond to on-the-ground projects. People respond to being out there, to seeing things happen. If you get too far bogged down in the planning, you can wind up losing folks along the way. So it's really important to have, for our program, to have that balance between being future thinking, doing the planning, but then getting people out there together. So next slide. And one of those ways that we get folks out on the ground is through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Partners Program. We work with Jennifer and her team as well. And currently we've got a program where we have funding that's dedicated towards getting 2 or more projects done out there on the ground. This is actually at a planning site on the Palo Alto Ranch, and is bringing together folks. We've partnered in with the local NRCD Natural Resource Conservation District as well. And they helped fund a workshop out there to take a look at this project that we're putting together, looking at some restoration efforts and bringing different stakeholders in and really teaching about the restoration planning process, which is not a topic that's been covered very widely in public facing things. There's a lot about installation, but how do you get folks on the ground? And as the planner, what are you looking at in the landscape? How are you making decisions about where to use your funding? So this has been a really engaged project that the Partners Program has helped us to kick off, and it'll get a project in on the ground, but has also been really community engaged in conversations about how to do restoration on the landscape and how to get conservation in there on a large scale. Next slide. And another way that we've worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has been through our Sonoran joint venture. And that's been related to this mass bobwhite quail conservation benefit agreement, which is a new name for essentially the same program, which is the Safe Harbor Agreement. And like I mentioned before, we have the Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge. It's on the south end of the valley. And so they're a big landholder within the valley. And they've been working, they were created for the mass bobwhite quail, which is an endangered species, and they've been working on getting their reintroduction program on the ground. And it's been going on for a while with varying degrees of successes. And then kind of in 2019, 2020, around that time, we were approached by the then wildlife refuge manager with news that they've been having more success, more consistent success in their breeding recovery programs. And he really wanted that to be great news for the valley as a whole. And that should be exciting news when an endangered species is succeeding and continuing to have good survival rates. But with that can also come regulatory aspects of where that survival and that species can impede getting other conservation projects in on the ground when compliance becomes too strenuous. So he was really worried that the recovery and the potential spread of the quail off the refuge onto different land holdings would wind up impeding conservation work throughout the valley, and wanted to be sure that we got out in front of this and where this bird reintroduction could really be a solid positive for the valley. So he brought up doing then a safe harbor agreement. And so we worked with the Fish and Wildlife Service team, both at the refuge and ecological services, to begin drafting the safe harbor agreement. It is still, it's quite a process, and now has switched over to the conservation benefit agreement, and it's still winding its way. The document itself needs to go into compliance through Fish and Wildlife, and basically what will happen is the Altar Valley will be the manager of this agreement, and we will sign up individual landowners under this agreement, so they'll have protections with a baseline of how many birds, and then if there are conservation actions that result in accidental take of these birds, those landowners will be protected from that and will continue to be inspiring conservation work in the Altar Valley and be caring for the landscape. Next slide. So as part of that, this has been a largely unfunded project. And then as the document got completed, there will be next steps of continuing to be part of this review process and getting the compliance taken care of, and then really partnering to get it out on the ground to work on approaching landowners and approaching folks throughout the valley and beyond about why they would want to sign up underneath this conservation benefit agreement. And part of the folks that we're excited to be working with are the Tohono O'odham, which is the nation that is next door to the Altar Valley. And they were approached early in the process as we were starting to work on this. We did some outreach to various agencies and stakeholders and the TO as well, to talk about whether or not they'd like to participate. And they have 3 districts that have chosen, they voted in to participate underneath this conservation benefit agreement. So they're within the area of landscape, which is really exciting. So there's going to need to be some outreach to them as well. So there's still plenty of action to go on. And we reached out under the Sonoran Joint Ventures funding program. We put in an application a couple years ago to them to see if they'd be willing to support the legwork of doing this work and working on partnerships and funding staff time to get out there, make those contacts, build those relationships. And that's going to be a long process for us within the Altar Valley. That'll probably be shorter. Neighbors are already known, but working with the Tohono O'odham, we're going to need to spend a little more time building relationships, explaining the conservation benefit agreement to individual landowners, and working through people's decision-making processes, whatever that might look like for them personally. So we received this funding from the Sonoran Joint Venture, and we're really excited to partner with them. And we're excited to have them supporting this and finding ways for birds and open landscapes and ranching to all be commingling and establishing great outcomes of large scale open landscapes.